right, the key discussion on topic 7 is actually, right, what we call the wage setting, price setting model, as well as the Phillips curve. So this lecture, this set of lecture notes, which I've briefly gone through with you, highlights to you, right? The first part are all definitions, so go and read it up yourself, okay? But when we look at this concept called unemployment, okay, is unemployment serious or not? The concept falls into the key, right, benchmark known as the natural rate. Okay, so I'm going to skip the first couple of pages because they are all very reading materials. We will go straight into looking at page, I think it's 13. Okay, so let's go to page 13. And don't worry about any missing charts or diagrams, they're not important. Okay, you can actually get it from my Google Drive. So let's go to topic 7, page 13. So the topic is unemployment. But is unemployment serious or not? Okay, a country can have unemployment 8%. But whether it's serious or not, you must always compare it to the natural rates. And we denote it as UN. Right? Every year or every quarter we measure unemployment. That is called actual rate. You take this actual rate and you compare to the natural rate, which is the lowest rate that the economy can take. Then you decide whether you should, tackle the problem. Okay, so in this case you can see, you look at these different countries. So if unemployment is 8%, you bring this 8% unemployment to Spain. Spain will say 8% unemployment is not serious because compared to her natural rate, 18.1, which is the minimum she can tolerate, 8% is very low. So it's not a problem in Spain. But you bring the same 8% unemployment rate, to Belgium. Belgium will say it is full employment for her because her actual and her natural rate are almost the same. So she don't say 8% is unemployment, she say it is full employment. Okay, but you take the same 8% unemployment rate and you bring it to Netherlands. Netherlands will say 8% unemployment is very serious because it is above her natural rate. So whenever we measure unemployment, we are looking at actual rate. But whether it's serious or not, you got to measure it against your natural rate. Only when it is above the natural rate, then it is a cause for concern. So therefore, we need to know how to measure the natural rate. And the natural rate, is deemed as the minimum unemployment, so it bounds to occur. You can't avoid it. It's always existing. So what causes natural rate to bound to occur is due to the first three types: classical, frictional, and structural. You bound to have people out of job because they don't have the correct skills. It's very logical. There are people who return from overseas university with a degree program that cannot find job in Singapore. It's called structural. There are people who love poetry, there are people who love archaeology, but they come back to Singapore, they can't find jobs. So in this case, they are structurally unemployed. So you can't avoid it. Frictional is time taken to search for jobs. Usually for fresh grads, for women who re-enter the workforce, they take time. So they were unemployed for that period, but you can tolerate it. So what might be new to you that I have to leave it to you to read is classical. So in this case, workers were out of job because wages were too high. The firms cannot afford them, and the wages stays high there. So these people remain unemployed. So I leave it to you to read in the earlier page, known as classical unemployment. Now this is how we generally measure natural rate. We do a survey on the unemployed and we ask them, do they fall into this category? So therefore the country will have, over the years, an average natural rate of unemployment. But measuring unemployment this manner is very passive. You cannot anticipate. So therefore, focus of our discussion is actually page 40. We want to know how would the natural rate change. We want to have a more active manner to measure the natural rate. Okay? And the model that we're going to use may sound new to a lot of you, is your wage and price setting model. Now, if you are reading your Dornbusch or your ManQ textbook, right, you will not see this term at all. They don't explicitly call it wage setting, price setting. But the behavior, they are all described in the textbook. So sometimes we give it a formal name, WSPS. If not, this behavior is just labor market behavior. Okay? Wage setting, price setting. Now, this model itself has very strange equations, so don't be intimidated because you are never doing calculation. This topic has no diagram, no calculation question, purely analysis. So if you can't remember the equation, it's perfectly fine, as long as you can explain the behavior. Okay? So it's all about the labor market. This is actually microeconomics. If you have the labor market, you will have labor supply, labor demand. Okay? Then the first concept is labor supply. Labor is supplied by workers. So when workers supply their manpowers, they forego leisure to work. Okay? They will actually set wages. So labor supply affect wage setting. So every time when you actually apply for a job or when you're doing job search, you go to maybe monster.com. When you search for a job, there's one thing on your mind is your salary. And the salary that you want must match your lifestyle. Alright? So that intuition in economics is wages, is actually dependable on your expected price level. Expected price level means future prices. You must have a salary that allows to cover your cost of living, not just for today, but primarily for the rest of the year. So when you look at future prices, it's called expected price level. Right? So in this case, PE and W will share a positive relationship. So in China, PE is rising. Cost of living is rising. There's shortage of food stuff. Okay, property prices are rising. In China, wages will be picking up momentum. Alright? So in this case, you can see, for example, if we expect prices to go up 10%. Now 10% price increase is very significant. But it's just a simple example to show you. If you can ask for your wages to go up exactly by 10, then your purchasing power, known as your real wage, is unchanged. Alright, so your wages must always catch up with prices for you to maintain your purchasing power. Okay? But in reality, it doesn't happen. So this is this is actually a comic strip in Singapore, telling us in reality, wages increase slower than prices. Alright, firms are usually jacking up fuel prices. Look at our transport fare. Alright, has been revised upwards. Okay, and food prices we know has been going upwards. But salary is always very slow to change. Alright, so wages should catch up with expected price. But wages rise very slowly. Reason is always because firms are not willing to increase our wages, and many a times our wages are bounded by contracts. Your wages is set for 1 year. So anytime within the year, if transport prices goes up, we couldn't adjust our wages readily. Right? So the first factor of wage setting model is wages depends on expected price level, PE. Okay? Now, how successful you can drive up wages, depends on many factors. So we move on to the next page. And one of it will be the level of unemployment rate. Right? whether you can successfully go to your employer and ask for a wage rise, you must look at the economic situation. Alright? So in times when there is high unemployment, workers have to accept lower wages. You cannot insist, the firms will not hire you. Right? So as shown in this comic strip, there was a job auction. There's only one job in the market, but you have 10 people applying. So you can see, right? If you want to make your services available, your wages from 50 pence, alright, to 20 pounds a week, it drops to 50 pence per hour. Then eventually somebody even offered to work for free. Right, so that tells you when times are bad, people need jobs. They are willing to accept wage cut. So that tells us wages and unemployment shares an inverse relationship. So PE can go up, things can get more expensive, but it doesn't mean you get higher wages. Whether you can demand for higher wages or not, you first must look at the unemployment situation. So in Europe, in Japan, right, you can see wages usually don't pick up despite prices are increasing. Okay? On the other hand, this is like China. Alright? PE goes up and the workers also can bid up wages. It's because there is labor shortage. There's economic boom in China. So they will have stronger bargaining power. Alright? So PE, expected price, is a reference point. But how successful you can affect wages depends on the economic situation, meaning to refer to the unemployment rate. Okay? Then the third factor is your structural and institutional factors. If you found this very mouthful, put in bracket, bargaining power. Alright? PE can go up. Alright? Unemployment rate can be low. But how much wages can go up depends whether you have strong bargaining power. Do you belong to a trade union? If you do, you can go on strike. Alright? To tell the firms and pressurize them to push up your wages. Alright? You can actually ask for a minimum wage law. Alright? So all over the world, even in our neighboring countries, workers nowadays can pressurize the government to set up minimum wage law. So if you have a minimum wage law, alright, when you ask for wages to go up, you can go up above the minimum level. So that will give you the strong bargaining power. Right? So in this case, your bargaining power given by a factor Z, right, will have a positive relationship with your wages. Okay, so in summary, if you look at the function, don't turn, okay, just to highlight to you. Workers set wages. How much wages can change depends on PE, and you can see it's a one-to-one relationship. And also a function of unemployment rate and your bargaining power. Alright, okay, so in this case, you can write it as equation 5 given in your notes. W is PE, 1 plus Z minus alpha U. And alpha is actually the response. It depends on the labor intensity in the country, whether labor is crucial in the use of production. So if you can't understand alpha, just remember there are 3 variables, PE, Z, and unemployment rate. So look at this wage setting behavior. It's very logical. You read about it in the newspapers. Just that over here, we formalize it. Alright, we study the relationship of the 3 variables affecting wages. Okay, so study the behavior well, because in all the later topics, particularly topic 8 and 9, we will repeatedly use this behavior. Alright, the unemployment, expected price will affect wage setting. Okay, now after wages are being set, okay, it doesn't stay there, it is now passed on to price setting. The firms must react to wages. So price setting is also known as the labor demand function. Alright, firms are the one who hire the workers, so firms will demand for labor. But how do wages affect prices? We go back to microeconomics. Alright, okay? Never mind if you didn't do micro or you've forgotten your intro level. But the logic is, firms want to make profit. Firms earn by selling the good by setting a price. Therefore, price must be above the cost. And to be specific, must be above unit cost, or we call it the marginal cost. Alright? So in this case, the prices that the firm sets, they must reflect, it can cover your cost of production. Okay? And we assume in this case, wages constitute a large part. So besides wages, the firm must still pay for raw materials which are in shortage, especially minerals like steel, like tin ore, they are in shortage. Alright? Firms must also pay for electricity, which is jacked up by oil prices. So raw materials and oil prices are increasing. But now wages will further shape the prices of goods and services. Right? And in this case, firms are profit seekers. They make sure the wages, right? Okay, the price that they set will sufficiently cover the wages. So the price setting equation tells us, right, you must cover your wages by a markup, and the markup is the mu. So it's very logical. P is more than MC, the additional cost, which is the unit labor cost. Right? So mu is therefore your markup, and therefore it depends on the firm's market power. If you recall, right, last year when we have the SMRT bus drivers that went on strike, they demand for higher wages. Right? So on the social media, on the newspaper, we all reacted. We think that, oh, okay, the drivers did get their wage demand, but eventually bus fare will go up. Because we know SMRT, they have very strong market power. They are the only two transport providers in Singapore. So their mu is very large. So that would affect the whole entire pricing. Okay? Compared to recently, there was a proposal to increase the wages of cleaners. Alright? Okay? Cleaners in hawker centres or cleaners, right, in the town council. Right? A lot of reports says we don't expect the wages of cleaners to go up to affect our lives. Because the mu, right, which is the hawkers who employ the, in this case, the cleaners, the town council, the market power is not strong. So they will not pass it on as high prices to us. So this is basic microeconomics. But now we focus on looking at the firms. So after we have, set our wages, firms will set prices, and he will actually mark up, above DW in the economy. So this is known as price setting. Okay? Now be very careful, there is two terms, they look quite alike. Just a while ago, we have unemployment yield. Okay, but here market power is the mu. The mu has a curly tail. So be very careful, they look alike. But focus on macro is actually on unemployment rates. So don't over focus on the mu, the firm's markup power. Okay, right? So in this case you can see this wage setting, price setting model is very powerful because it tells us the reason why in all over the world countries are facing inflation is because there is a wage spiral phenomenon. The moment wages goes up, prices will go up. But after prices goes up, expected price will go up, wages go up again. So it's never ending. So that's why, tapering or controlling the labor market is very, very tricky. Right? And you cannot put a full stop to it. Right? Workers deserve higher wages to cope with cost of living. But firms will mark up prices. So it will be a never-ending story. Okay? If you recall 2-3 years ago, Singapore has inflation because of the capital inflow. Property prices soared Food prices went up because of the population boom. Right? And our government actually went to different hawker centres and appealed to them. So certain hawker centres say they will freeze their prices for 6 months. Right? So you need government's intervention, but such intervention is against market forces. But you don't have a choice. Alright? If not, inflation will just keep piping up, and the poor will therefore suffer. Okay, so this is labour demand, labour supply. So we're going to combine them. Remember, our objective is to measure the natural rate of unemployment. Right, we're not just interested in wages and prices, but they actually affect the labour market. Okay, so we equate price setting and wage setting. This is like labour demand equals labour supply. Now, the entire derivation is not required. So only for those who are strong in maths, you can run through. Because in section A in the exam, derivation is not crucial. Okay, so I leave it to you to read, but when we equate the two equations, we put in two assumptions, that P equals to PE, so that we can equate the two equations. We assume your inflation, your unemployment rate is at your natural rate. Rewriting all the equation, all I need you to do is to highlight for me equation 8. Right? Telling us in this case, we are interested to measure our natural rate of unemployment, but how much it is. Okay? Besides measuring the three types, classical, frictional, and structural. Another way we can preempt government about the natural rate is to monitor the ZAC and the mu. Alright, so what is ZAC? ZAC is your bargaining power. So all over the world you can see, alright, government must give a careful consideration on the minimum wage in your country. Now, if you look at US natural rate was 6.9. What gave her this 6.9 was because her ZAC is very strong. US has very high minimum wage. Alright? The least paid worker in US is still paid US $10 per hour, and that's very high. Alright? So that amounts to almost more than $100 of pay salary per day for the American. It means in average they earn $4,000 Sing dollar a month, and that's very high. But that was constituted by a high minimum wage. So if US or other countries has high minimum wage, the ZAC is very large, the natural rate will be very high, which we saw US 6.9. Okay? Now, I'll just toggle back and show you, you don't have to turn. Remember the natural rate? Look at these other countries. Euro, France, Belgium, UK, right? Germany. Very often you hear about their workers go on strike. Recently, UK workers went on strike. It was 2 days ago. Okay? The French workers, the German workers, they often go on strike. So the trade union is very strong. Alright? So if trade union is very strong, it means workers' bargaining power measured by ZAC is large. That's why it constituted to these countries having fairly large natural rate of unemployment. Right, so going back to your notes, and you can see, okay, a high ZAC will constitute to a high UN. But for Singapore, alright, our UN is fairly low because we don't have minimum wage law, and there is actually quite a tight control over trade union. We don't see workers go on strike. Alright, okay, we only see, alright, what we call a healthy discussion between employer, Ministry of Manpower, and the trade union. So government will monitor. So if you have a low ZAC, which is your workers' bargaining power, you can keep a low natural rate of unemployment. Okay? Then of course the second factor is the mu, the firm's market power. So you have to keep a close control over the firms. If firms, they are too large, they will easily mark up prices, leading wages to go up, but the firms cannot afford, they will retrench the workers. So that will result to high natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so I would say, compared to these two, focus on the Z. Alright, to tell you the role of trade union, the role of minimum wage will therefore affect the natural rate in your country. Okay, so in summary, the topic is called unemployment. But is unemployment serious or not? It must be compared to the natural rate. And in some countries, the natural rate are very high because of a strong Z. Whereas in countries like Singapore, natural rate is lower because of a weaker Z. But it also tells us anytime there is manpower policy change, we can predict what happens to the UN, the natural rate. Okay? Now, although the natural rate is a comparison to tell you whether unemployment is serious or not, there is another usage of natural rate. Okay? So that will wrap up the discussion as given in page 18. And let's look at this equation. Okay? Government must be active. Government cannot be passive. So, the derivation, again we will skip, will tell us, eventually, using the UL equation, we will reach this equation. Alright, this term here, you can copy down, is your countries. We call it potential, or some of you call it the country's maximum output. Okay, using all your available resources. Right, so you call it the YN. And some of you will recall in your ADAS model, this is the vertical line. The maximum output the country can produce using the available resources. Okay, so the derivation shows that your potential output in the country depends on A. A is your technology. Okay, the definition is given in your notes. Okay, and your L is your labor force. And just a while ago, we saw our UN. You can put it in. It was Z plus mu over alpha. Right, so that tells us, we look at, for example, Singapore. We'll put a note there besides the equation. Right? Government is interested to promote growth over the next 5 to 10 years. So you are interested to increase your potential or your maximum output. Okay, so how can you do so? So you can see in Singapore, we are increasing our A via R&D. So lots of money are spent on R&D each year. And we are always importing the latest technology. We are always upgrading our infrastructure to embrace the new technology so that we can increase our productivity and efficiency. So when efficiency goes up, potential output can increase. You can do things faster in a more efficient manner. Right? Your maximum output can go up. Okay, and of course, increase L. Right, remember our Singapore's population white paper. Okay, that talks about aiming to reach our population beyond the 6 million. That is actually to increase the size of your resources, primarily your labor pool. Okay, then of course, by actually keeping a low UN. Alright, so that's why in Singapore we are very resisting the minimum wage law. Alright, we keep a tight lid over the trade union. We keep a close monitoring over the movement. So that in this case, right, we want to have a low, right, Z and a low mu. Now you know in Singapore, alright, our monopolists or our oligopolists, which are mainly our telcos, our transport companies, they have to write in to propose why wages or why prices has to go up. So government is controlling them, controlling their market power. Alright, so in Singapore to promote growth, okay, we need to maintain a low natural rate. Okay, then at the same time increase A as well as increase the L. Okay, now let's look at other countries. Okay, let's look at now China. She also wants to increase her A, her YN. Okay, right? So she also increased her A, increased her L. Okay, but China realized recently Z went up. Right? Trade union grew stronger. Workers go on strike. Workers demand high wages. They join trade union. They begin to exercise their rights. Right? So Z goes up, and that tells us UN may actually increase. So when the economy opens her doors, when her workers are better educated, they are exposed to the media. Right? They know their rights. They will bargain for higher wages. So that would worsen the natural rate and therefore, right, limit the growth of a country. Okay? Then of course you can look at, for example, other countries. Okay, maybe say Japan. Okay, you have aging population. So your L can go down. Okay, so all this will discuss how it can actually, right, improve or in fact generate a higher potential output. So some factors can be within your control, but some cannot. Right, but here we want to see that controlling the UN can be very important. Right, so you can put it in the final one. Spain, they have the highest UN. So that tells you they tend to have a lower YN. If their A and L are low. Right? So the understanding of the natural rate of unemployment, this minimum rate you can tolerate, it's not just telling you whether unemployment is serious or not. It also affects your country's potential output. Because if you have high natural rate, means people are idling around. Naturally, right, your maximum capacity is lower. So for such countries, right, to overcome and to grow again, they take a long time. So that's why they are still in the deep mud that they are facing right now. Okay, so that wraps up the discussion of topic 7. And you can see the entire topic there's another segment, part 2, but in part 1 you can see they're all just concepts telling you, right, that the economy, you don't just look at output, you also look at prices as well as unemployment. And for unemployment, it's a very descriptive topic. There's actually no diagram. The diagrams that you tend to use is in microeconomics, but macro we don't. We merely look at the behavior of workers and the firms affecting UN and therefore affecting the YN. Okay, so we'll take a break from here. Let's come back in 10